Well, look, again, it's a work in progress. If I had figured it out, the world would look different.
In fact, what he wants is a successful movie. He wants to protect the movie. And all through the text messages, you'll see over and over and over again, him saying, I don't want to hurt her. I want to protect her. Let's give her what she wants.
You've been following the Justin Baldoni, Blake Lively thing?
Bro, Blake Lively, talk about ruin your reputation, and Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah, they up. Ryan's trying to get out of it now. He's trying to get out of the lawsuit, and they're like, you were a key part of this.
At the TIME100 Gala, the atmosphere buzzed with excitement, but beneath the surface, tension crackled like static. Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds arrived dressed to perfection, their every move carefully rehearsed for the flashing cameras. Blake glided across the carpet in a golden gown, smiling like nothing was wrong. But just hours before the event, court records became public, tying her upcoming film, It Ends With Us, to major Backstage scandals involving director Justin Baldoni. Official filings detailed internal complaints about unsafe working conditions, broken contracts, and emotional mistreatment among cast and crew. Blake, named in several depositions as a silent enabler, was now stepping onto a global stage, determined to rewrite the story with a well-timed appearance. As reporters shouted their names and fans screamed from behind velvet ropes, there was an eerie sense that the smiles were forced.
Ryan, I would say, in my opinion, is plausibly the most guilty party of this entire thing, okay?
Ryan started the fire!
But anyways, he did file to be dismissed from the lawsuit. And that thesis is essentially that Ryan is actually such a good guy that he kind of had to be a bad guy.
The laughter rehearsed. Blake waved gracefully, pretending the walls weren't closing in. Ryan stayed close, looking noticeably more strained, his eyes darting around the crowd like he was searching for an escape route. But the cameras caught more than just glamour. They caught the truth bleeding through the cracks. In one viral photo, a woman in the background turned away in disgust, rolling her eyes as Blake posed. That woman was quickly identified as a senior production advisor from It Ends With Us, one who had filed formal grievances just months earlier. Her visible disdain wasn't just personal. It was rooted in a storm of legal documents now out in the open for anyone to see.
Something about that is very bizarre, and it's making me want to dig deeper into what is really going on with her. Is Blake Lively diagnosed with something that could actually affect this case and actually explain?
And yet, despite the mounting evidence, Blake stood under the bright lights, lifting her chin higher, smiling wider. It wasn't just defiance, it was survival. In that moment, she wasn't just an actress at a gala. She was a symbol of how far Hollywood would go to protect its image, even when the truth was pounding at the door. The charade had begun, but the damage was already done, and no amount of posing could erase what the world now knew. The night was meant to be pure spectacle, but for anyone paying attention, it was a masterclass in desperation. As Blake Lively clung to her mother's arm and Ryan Reynolds shuffled nervously beside them, the charade became impossible to ignore. Every step they took on the red carpet seemed rehearsed to exhaustion. Photographers captured their beaming faces, but the tension in their bodies told another story. Tight shoulders, stiff smiles, eyes that kept darting away from the flashes. They weren't there to celebrate. They were there to survive, and the world was beginning to notice. As the trio posed, a woman in the background, later identified through confirmed gala attendee lists as a production executive closely tied to the It Ends With Us set.
Narrator, she did not listen. She did not take my advice at all. I said that having read through Blake Lively's complaints, that it was evident to me that she was likely under the influence when she filed her complaint.
Stole the spotlight for a brief, brutal second. Her face, twisted into a look of sheer disgust, said everything that Blake's carefully worded public statements had tried to deny. This wasn't just an awkward moment, it was the mask slipping. The executive, known for filing a workplace complaint that outlined toxic conditions under Justin Baldoni's leadership, had refused to clap during Blake's entrance, according to eyewitnesses who submitted statements directly to media outlets covering the event. She stood stiff, arms crossed, while others rose to their feet. The cameras didn't catch everything, but they caught enough. The look exchange between her and another staffer, the brief whisper behind a raised hand, the visible rolling of eyes when Blake gave her dazzling pageant wave. These were not acts of random shade. They were silent protests.
This text from Blake Lively is insane. If you knew me in person longer, you'd have a sense of how flirty and yummy the ball busting would play.
Built on documented grievances that had already entered the legal record. Meanwhile, Blake glided through the crowd as if floating above it all, hugging celebrities, posing for the press, and exchanging pleasantries with executives who had privately debated removing her from the gala lineup entirely. Internal Time magazine emails, leaked and authenticated, showed deep concerns from event organizers who feared that Blake's presence might ignite controversy and overshadow honorees with active humanitarian efforts. But contracts had been signed, deals promised, and powerful agencies refused to let one scandal, no matter how real, derail their marketing machine. Backstage, things were even messier. Ryan Reynolds, usually the picture of ease and charisma, was seen pacing in the private lounge area, hands shoved deep into his pockets, according to a security staff report filed post-event. He reportedly refused several media interviews scheduled for him and Blake, citing personal stress and asking to leave immediately after Blake's speech.
He told him to come into the dressing room while she was breastfeeding. And then part of the complaint was that he came into the dressing room while I was breastfeeding. Like, you literally have a text exchange back and forth.
Eyewitness accounts from event workers described Ryan as nervous and agitated, repeatedly glancing at his phone and avoiding conversations longer than a few words. This wasn't the playful Ryan fans adored. This was a man trapped between loyalty to his wife and the sinking realization that the house of cards they built was about to collapse. The photographs told a story that PR teams scrambled to spin, but the reality bled through every glossy image and carefully edited video clip. Blake's golden gown, her radiant smile, Ryan's half-hearted laughter. They were not moments of triumph. They were symptoms of an unraveling narrative, a desperate, thinly veiled attempt to outrun a scandal that was no longer whispers and rumors, but confirmed facts documented in legal papers, now circulating through every major news outlet. And yet, they pressed on, their every move stitched together by handlers, publicists, and crisis managers who knew that even the hint of hesitation could turn into a media bloodbath overnight.
I am so oddly invested in this case. I follow so many TikTokers who have gone through 800 pages of case files. And listen, I'm not shocked by this latest conspiracy because she said herself, her husband is all over this film.
It wasn't just uncomfortable to watch, it was haunting, like witnessing the final performance before the curtain falls for good. But the real collapse began when Blake Lively stepped onto the stage. The room dimmed, the spotlight centered on her gleaming figure, and for a fleeting moment, it almost seemed like she might pull it off. She clutched the microphone with both hands, voice quivering ever so slightly as she launched into a speech about integrity, trust, and lifting up unheard voices. The words echoed across the ballroom like a bad joke. Verified documents from the production of It Ends With Us showed a starkly different reality, one where those very voices had been silenced, contracts breached, and employees threatened into submission.
Yeah, and also, like, this is the most, like, divisive thing we've seen in a long time. You're either Team Justin or you're Team Blake. It's like the new, like, Team Jacob, Team Edward.
Blake's speech, dripping with earnest emotion, directly contradicted facts that anyone could now look up with a few taps on their phone. High above the audience, Time magazine executives watched nervously from their VIP balcony. Leaked emails confirmed that internal debates had raged for weeks about whether Blake should even appear. One memo, flagged as urgent, spelled it out clearly. Association with Blake Lively at this time may result in reputational damage due to pending civil actions involving her current film production. But powerful sponsorship deals were locked in, and pulling Blake at the last minute would trigger breach penalties in the millions. So, the show went on, even as the foundation crumbled beneath them. Down on the floor, whispers rippled through the crowd. Guests exchanged loaded glances. A few bold attendees, catching the uncomfortable vibe, quietly slipped out during Blake's speech, shielding their faces from the press stationed outside the ballroom doors.
Dear Judge Lyman, as counsel for Wayfair Studios LLC, Justin Baldoni, Jamie Heath, Steve Sarowitz, It Ends With Us Movie LLC, Melissa Nathan.
In the footage broadcast later that night, careful editing cropped out the walkouts, the grim expressions, the rigid posture of guests who refused to clap. But for those who had been in the room, it was undeniable. This was not a triumphant return. This was a desperate plea for public forgiveness disguised as celebration. And Ryan Reynolds? He sat stiffly at a small round table near the stage, his hands folded so tightly in his lap that the blood drained from his knuckles. Camera angles tried to frame him as a supportive husband, nodding along with Blake's every word. But eyewitness reports later confirmed that he barely moved during her speech, staring down at the tablecloth for long stretches, as if willing himself to disappear. New security logs filed after the event noted that Ryan requested an immediate escort to a private exit the second Blake finished speaking.
This is what you get, though. This is what you get. You're trying to ruin a guy's livelihood by using the Me Too movement.
Because they were trying to take over the movie.
He posted the receipts. He's like, remember our
crazy.
tech exchange?
An unusual move for a Time 100 honoree, where post-speech mingling is a key part of the night. But the damage was done. As Blake offered her final, trembling thank you, the polite applause that followed was hollow, thin, and short-lived. The music swelled to drown out the awkward energy, but it was far too late. The mask had slipped, the cracks had widened, and no amount of makeup, publicists, or manufactured speeches could hide the truth now. The Time 100 Gala had not saved Blake Lively's image. It had exposed it under the hottest, cruelest spotlight imaginable. By sunrise, the fallout had already begun ripping through the headlines like wildfire. News outlets weren't buying the polished narrative Blake's team had spent months constructing. Instead, they blasted out screenshots of court filings, leaked internal memos, and damning photographs from the gala itself.
The agency group PR LLC and Jennifer Abel, collectively the Wayfarer parties, we write to advise the court of an issue that the Wayfarer parties wish to address at the upcoming conference on Monday, February 3rd, 2025.
Major platforms published side-by-side comparisons of Blake's glowing words about creating safe spaces, with deposition excerpts that outlined how crew members on It Ends With Us had been forced to work through unsafe conditions without proper grievance channels. There was no longer any space left for spin. The facts were sitting on the table, cold and undeniable. Social media turned savage. Thousands of furious comments flooded Time magazine's official accounts, with hashtags like #ArcTime, To Tell the Truth, and Go Lively Cover-Up trending within hours. Public figures who had once lined up to praise Blake's career began distancing themselves in carefully worded statements. Brands she was set to endorse quietly began pulling scheduled campaigns. One major cosmetics company, days away from launching a multi-million-dollar partnership with Blake, confirmed through a spokesperson that the deal had been indefinitely postponed.
Blake Lively fears profound mental health issues are at risk of being leaked amid Justin Baldoni legal drama
due to emerging concerns regarding the subject's public controversy. In less than 24 hours, Blake Lively's carefully crafted image had gone from Hollywood royalty to public liability. And Blake and Ryan? They didn't stick around to weather the storm. Verified travel records showed that within 2 hours of leaving the gala, they boarded a private jet bound for an undisclosed location outside the United States. Flight manifests confirmed they weren't alone. Several high-profile crisis management specialists were listed as passengers. It wasn't a vacation, it was a full-scale retreat. Insiders close to Time later revealed that Blake had canceled all post-gala interviews, meet-and-greet opportunities, and even a private fundraising dinner where she had been scheduled to speak. She vanished from the public eye with the same speed and calculation she had once used to dominate it. Meanwhile, the lawsuit surrounding It Ends With Us picked up steam.
In Blake's first amended complaint, Blake changed what she alleges about what happened while filming the slow dance scene, now that the footage has been released for everyone to see.
Court clerks confirmed new filings, including a subpoena ordering Blake's production team to turn over internal emails, financial documents, and all communications related to the alleged on-set mistreatment. Legal analysts across national news stations broke down the implications live, agreeing almost unanimously. Blake Lively was no longer a passive bystander. She was a central figure. Her silence, her public appearances, even her speech at the gala could now be entered as evidence in court to demonstrate what prosecutors were calling willful participation in the concealment of workplace abuses. The silence from Blake's camp grew louder by the hour. No posts, no tweets, no apologies, no explanations. It was a vacuum, and in that vacuum, the public filled in the blanks with outrage, betrayal, and disbelief. Time magazine, desperately trying to shift focus, rushed out a new wave of content highlighting other honorees, scrubbing Blake's name from promotional materials where they could get away with it. But screenshots never die, and neither does public memory. In the end, the TIME100 Gala wasn't remembered for celebrating humanity's greatest changemakers. It became a symbol of how glitz, glamour, and fake smiles couldn't protect anyone, not even Hollywood's golden girl, from the truth. A truth now backed by courtrooms, documents, and a worldwide audience that was no longer willing to look the other way.